Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Unplugged Woodworkers podcast. So what have I been up to? I've been screwing up my woodwork, that's what I've been up to. So I've been making this table, excuse me. So this table was to match an original table I'd done, I think it was like a year ago. So it was for a couple down in London. I've made them a couple of pieces of furniture. They've been very kind and they've been reoccurring customers. So obviously they wanted another table to match this. The original table kind of turned into a bedside table, so obviously they wanted both sides of the bed. So upon making this, got all the joinery right. I never checked it, or I checked the angles. So if you want to check this out, there's lots of photos and there's quite a few reels on Instagram while I've been making this. So when I've done it, I've never checked photos correctly, and I am also doing this off memory. And I think I had about 3 sizes, so a lot of it's memory. Regardless of that, I'd done it, had all the joinery cut, I put the thing together, everything fitted perfectly. I was really happy with how the joinery turned out, but it just didn't look right. The angles of the legs didn't look right. As I said, I should have literally, lined the legs up, clamped them in place, just to check for a visual. If I had done this, I would have known straight away that 80 degrees wasn't enough and it needed to come out to 70 degrees. I would have come to that conclusion, but I didn't check it. I got a little bit gung-ho, what's the word I'm looking for? Enthralled, is that the right word? I just like getting ahead of myself, enjoying the joinery, It's been a while since I've done like bridal joints and a cross-halving joints, which I didn't know what a cross-halving joint was. So I had to basically ask, and I think it was Pippi Oak. He informed me. I didn't have a clue what the joint was called, so it's called the cross-halving joint. Ironically, I did actually do a video on this. I am doing a video on the table build, but I thought I'd break it down. It's going to be broke down into 3 videos. One's going to be the cross-halving joint, which I did release. So if you want to check that out, it's there to be checked out. There will be links in the description. I also am going to do the bridal joints, the original one. So that's going to be getting released, I think, like sometime next week, and then obviously I'm going to do the full lot. But obviously I'm going to be skimming over the joint work, obviously because there's going to be 2 dedicated videos to it. So going back to the joints, having realised that the angle wasn't enough, I've basically had to remake the legs. I didn't want to remake the whole thing. I had to remake the legs because obviously different angles I would have lost the height, so the heights would have been different. So the legs had to be remade. Obviously I didn't want to cut the female portion of the bridal joints again, so I was able to save the cross-halving joint section, if you will. So I've just basically had to have a good head scratch, and I was able to basically change the angle of the joints. It's a little bit too much to explain, but if you go onto my Instagram, you'll see exactly what I've done. Rather than me, I don't think I could explain it correctly, but that's what I've done. And other than it taking a lot of time to redo them, which is always the ironic thing with me, it's kind of, if I've got money, if I'm making money, I haven't got the time, and if I've got the time, I haven't got the money, and so on and so forth. It's a vicious circle, is it? So it is. So I wanted to say a big thank you to Anna Louise. Anna Louise, I'm not going to try and pronounce your second name because I can't pronounce it, so I'm not even going to try. But Anna Louise, you know who you are. Thank you very much for the coffee. So I kind of forgot to do what impressed me last week, so here it is this week. So what impressed me this week? So this was a sculpture by Artwood BG. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check it out. And this was a wooden sculpture of a naked lady. It was, I'm looking at maybe about 6 inches in length. The detail in it is absolutely phenomenal. Obviously she's a naked lady. The detail's so detailed, if you will. You can actually see the pelvic bones as he's turning it. You know, as the light's hitting it, you can see all these different features coming out. You can see our pelvic bones. See the little dimples in the bottom of our back. It's absolutely, well, I don't know how long it's taken, but it's absolutely phenomenal. He's a very, very talented sculptor. I've just discovered him myself. I'll have to give him a follow myself. I've actually just thought, and I haven't even given the guy a follow. He's absolutely stunning, some of his work. But I'll leave a link in the description. That really, really impressed me. I don't think I've ever seen so much detail in that sort of a sculpture. You know, everything from the belly button, it just honestly blew my mind how detailed it was. It kind of looks simple, but as he turns it, you can like start to see, you know, the detail in it. Even the ribs, you know, same again. You're looking at it face on, and as he starts turning, you can obviously the light's hitting it, and you can start to see the ribs and everything. It's absolutely phenomenal. So today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about staked furniture, going into a little bit more detail. I have done a podcast on this, but this was a kind of a request from one of my listeners. So I'm going to try and answer a few of her questions. Obviously, I cannot answer all of the questions because there was a couple of questions I haven't really explored. Like one of the questions was, so I can't really quite remember, to be honest. It was more of with the staked furniture, like, is it like a certain like angle that you shouldn't take it past in case of like failure or destruction, if you will. So I've never really took a staked furniture piece like basically to failure. Although I have broke a conical tenon before, but that was just me being stupid. So it wasn't really anything to do with the angles and so on and so forth. That was just me being silly, as I said. So I'm just going to be going over a few things. You know, I have got a decent amount of experience in this. Having said that, I'm not a chair maker. I don't pretend to be a chair maker. Although I have made chairs, I've made a number of chairs, several chairs. But as I said, I'm not a chair maker. So take what I say with a pinch of salt. This is more my experience. So for those of you that don't know or don't understand, it's probably a good place to start to kind of understand why a rake and splay is used. So it's probably more simple for me just because of the nature of me daytime job, or the job I've been doing for the last 24 years, I think it is now, which is a scaffolder. So obviously I understand structures, I understand, you know, like the basis of structures. You know, kind of how they stay up, the stability, you know, the rest of it. So that helps me out a lot. But obviously, I know everyone's not a scaffolder. I know everyone hasn't got that sort of knowledge. So, kind of the only thing that's really popping into my head that would help you out to understand the rake and the splay, or why it's done. If you can imagine the Great Pyramids at Giza. The pyramids of Giza, the base is absolutely enormous. I don't know the size of the base. I should, because I've just recently been watching a few documentaries about them. But regardless of that, everyone can picture the Great Pyramids in their head. You know, the base is absolutely, you know, huge, and then it goes to a point at the top, or what's left of it anyway. So it's very, very strong. The base is like huge. It's wide. If you were able to push that, you obviously you can't, but it would be very, very strong. I mean, you've only got to look at the amount of time that it's been up, or at least the amount of time they believe it's been up. There's a lot of historians that are coming forward now and saying, the pyramids are a lot older than, what were first initially thought. But that's a total different story and whatever else. So if you take the same kind of principle and you bring it towards, say, a coffee table. Coffee table is a good example. So if you've got a coffee table and you've got if you've got 4 legs, and those legs are just coming straight down at 90 degrees from the tabletop, yeah, it's not particularly, it's not going to fall over, is it? But at the same time, depending on the width of it, the width of the tabletop, it could be quite easy to knock over. I mean, like, you could literally just be walking in full stride, and you could bang your shin into it or your knee into it, whatever, and you could easily knock that table over. So if you take the principles of the pyramid, if you will, and those legs, you actually splay, you put a rake and a splay on those legs. So correct us if I'm wrong here, because I always get this mixed up. So, but I'm going to try to explain rake and splay. So for this example, I'm going to use the Roman workbench, because I'm surmising a lot of people that are listening to this podcast, they'll know what I'm all about, and they'll know I use a Roman workbench on a daily basis when I'm home. So the rake would be running the length of the Roman workbench, yeah, and the splay would be the angle going the width of it. So that's kind of your rake and splay. And obviously, when you're adding a rake and splay to this table that originally had 90-degree legs, it doesn't take much to imagine, even without you even touching it or seeing it in person. It doesn't take a lot of the imagination to know that that table is significantly going to be a lot more steadier, because the legs are kind of are raking out and splaying out. So it's kind of the same as, you could put 2 people together, basically get 2 people, get them to hook, hold each other's arms, quite close together, maybe a foot in between the chest, and you could get a third person, and you could get the third person to push them. So these people would move quite easily. These 2 people would move quite easily with that one person just pushing them either at the back, the front, or side to side. Now, if you were to get the 2 people that are clenching together to kind of lean themselves into each other, and also to kind of do a very mild split with the legs, and I do mean very mild, brace themselves up a little bit, that person that was doing the pushing is going to be met by a lot of resistance, and it's kind of the same sort of principle. So if you can understand that, you kind of understand the reason behind a rate and explain the things, the how to put it, the benefits of it. If you can understand that, then that's the benefits you get from it. Okay, so angles. I think some people can get like really anal about the angles. What I've read over the years in magazines and whatever else. But I really don't like delve into the angles too much. In a sense, I don't get like I kind of don't get too excited about them. it's only probably because I can't understand the mathematical formula to kind of work them out, because there is some sort of like mathematical formula you can use to work all this out, and it just boggles my mind, things like that. It's the same as algebra, isn't it? I mean, you like, I remember when I was like a young boy, many moons ago, and I left school. And I knew back then I wanted to be a joiner. Even back then I loved woodwork. As a kid, I loved woodwork, and I loved like tinkering about and doing things with wood and whatever else. So I went to do a test, and this test was to get on for the local council, to become a joiner. And I failed, and I failed on the mathematics, I failed on the algebra, and it just boggles my mind, because I really don't see the point in algebra and woodworking. I'm sure there's one or two years that might be willing or knowingly going to correct us over this, but I really just don't see it. Anyway, I digress. So one of I think it was the first sightline that was introduced to me, probably via Chris Schwartz, probably. I would guess maybe in the Motors and Tenant magazine, was 38 degrees. 38 degrees for your sight line, and this was accompanied by a 15 degree bevel. Basically, you've got your sliding bevel, or I think you Americans call it, is it a sliding T bevel? Something like that, I think you call it, the Americans. So anyway, I set my bevel to 15 degrees, and that's kind of one of the first ones I used. Since then, I have experimented a little bit. I think I've went down to like 20. I think it was 24 when I built my the oak Roman workbench. I think I experimented at 24 degrees. I think it was. And I think that was accompanied by 15 degree bevel. Basically, I set my bevel at 15 degrees. I could be wrong on that, but you would have to check the Roman Workbench ebook, which is available, and it's free, of course. There will be a link in the description if you should want to check that out. So, kind of what I'm kind of leaning towards, and what I kind of do now, depending on like what I'm making, I'll kind of just eye it now. Is what I'll do. I'll get a rough idea where I'm going to plant the legs, or all the way I'm going to basically drill for the conical tenons, or maybe even round tenons if I'm doing round tenons, whichever it may be. I'll draw a 90 degree line straight across the width. That's just argument's sake. Let's just say it's some sort of bench, maybe a Roman workbench, maybe a bench for the kitchen, whatever, some sort of bench. So I'll draw the 90 degree line straight across. I'll roughly mark out where I think I'm going to put the conical tenons, where I'm going to drill for them, and then basically I'll just get the leg, or a template. I use a template. And I'll basically just kind of move it around, and kind of just, gauge what sort of angle I want, what looks good to us. Again, this depends, what I'm making, and I'm going to get into this in a minute. But I think that's kind of, what I'm kind of leaning towards now. I know Chris Schwartz, he uses metal rods, I believe. And I'm sure he does this in the Anarchist Design book. I could be wrong. It's something like that he does it in. If you haven't checked out the Anarchist Design book, I'd highly recommend it. It's pretty good for stake furniture. If you kind of just getting into it and it interests you. It's a really good book. I've read it, quite a number of times. I keep on referring back to it. It's one of my favourite woodworking books. I don't think I'll ever sell it. I think I'll have that to the day I die. Really, really good book. Highly recommended. So something else to take into consideration when you if you are kind of messing around with the angles and stuff, if you're looking to get some sort of like a big rake and a big splay, you really want to take into consideration the thickness of the material that you're going to be putting these staked the staked legs into. If it's some sort of a bench, obviously the greater the rake and the greater the splay, it's going to be putting a lot of strain onto the conical tenons. But you can get away with quite a lot. As I said, I haven't experimented a lot, with really, really wide rakes and splays. But as what I would recommend, if you are going to go that way, don't skim on the thickness of the material. Obviously, the wider the rake and splay, I really think you should be making the thickness wider. Even if it's a Roman workbench or a shave horse, something like that. If you're wanting a lot of stability, I would really recommend to use a thicker material, 3-4 inches. It's really going to help you out. Obviously, there's a lot of factors. There's just far too much to cover. I am kind of trying to brush over, or give you a summary of a lot of the things that I kind of would like do myself. If I was making something. So there's going to be different angles for different pieces of furniture you're making, or different things you're making. So kind of now, to give you an example, or to give you a couple of examples, I'm lying if I say if, when I build my next Roman workbench, and this may be the last one I build, who knows. But when I do build it, I'm going to be making sure that the rake and splay is probably going to be a lot more than I've done before. And the position of the conical tenons is going to be spread out more apart from each other, probably again more than I've ever done, other than in seats. And this is totally 110% to give me more stability. Obviously, I've been using Roman workbenches for however many years now, so I kind of know what works, I kind of know what doesn't work, I know the problems, what I'm faced with, daily. So that's one of the things. It's kind of because I understand the problems and I understand, the basics of a rake, like the reason for rake and splay. I know that if I give myself a bit more of a rake and a bit more of a splay and bring the legs apart a little bit more than I have done in previous benches, I know that's going to give me a lot more stability. So the problem with this is that obviously the wider you bring these apart, obviously the more splay you give, and the further apart you bring the legs from each other, it means that the legs are going to be, or at least the bottom of the legs are going to be protruding out a lot more past the edge of the bench, which can be an issue. It's either going to trip you up if you're not careful, which personally I don't see as too much of a problem. I really don't. Or you're going to stump your toe, which for me could be a little bit of a problem, since I do a lot of the woodwork barefoot, which I don't know how long that's going to last for. Obviously we're in September now, so the bad weather will be on its way before long. So I am making the most of it. We've had a lovely week with some lovely weather. So going back to the examples and talking about obviously the Roman workbench and the legs, splaying out, to the point where it could be a tripping hazard, or it could be, I could stump me toe on it. Now, if you take the same example and now you put it into, let's just say a table. Let's say a coffee table, for instance. You don't really want for those legs to be, splaying out like that much, and you obviously it's just going to be a hazard, because you're going to, especially if it's in a house with a family. Let's just say it could be a busy house. There might be, you've got your mum and your dad, you've got, you might have 3 or 4 children running around. Depending on the ages of the children, you might have the children's friends over, then you've got aunties and uncles and what. So it could be a very busy house. So you can imagine if you've got this table, in the kind of and the legs are like kind of throwing haymakers. If you can grasp, kind of, I'm exaggerating here, but if they're splaying out like a lot, it's just, the kids are going to stump the toes. There's going to be lots of tears and snots, and the adults, there's going to be a lot of swearing and so on and so forth. So you have kind of got to take, things like this into consideration. I mean, this approach can be transferred, not just with like staked furniture, but it can be, it can be transferred into many different aspects of furniture making or furniture design. So to give you another example would be to give you an example of a dining table. So I think with a dining table, I think you could have a good splay. This is I'm just thinking about this in my head as I'm talking, kind of designing in my head, if you will. So you could have a decent splay, and I think for me personally that would be very appealing to the eyes. But where the rake, obviously, I don't think I would have as great of a rake. I think I'd still, the rake would be, something similar to what I'm used to, whatever that angle is. I think it's 10 to 15 degrees. I don't think I would exceed that rake. So again, just to reiterate, and again, correct us if I'm wrong here, but I'm sure the rake is the angle going with the length of the table. So as I said, the rake, I would keep it about 10 to 15 degrees, and obviously the splay would be a lot more. I really don't know what the angle would be. I would probably have to mess around with it. But I've actually got a picture in my head now. I obviously couldn't tell you what the angle would be, but in my head it looks quite a good angle. So the thing to take into consideration with this is that if I was to do something like this, or you were to do something like this, you've got to think about, you would have to bring the placement of the conical tenons, or the round tenons, if you will. You would have to bring them closer together, because obviously, if it was just a bog standard angle, the kind of, there would be more towards the outside of the table. But because you've put more of a splay on, the angle's greater, and it would basically, the legs would be sticking out. And it's the same again, you don't want the legs sticking out, past the edges of the table, because someone's just going to stump the toe on them, and stumping your toe is never good. So with this, obviously you would have to bring it in. But something else to take into consideration is, it's a table, it's not a workbench, so you're not going to be sitting on top of it. You're not going to be like, you're not going to have wood on top of it. You're not going to be hammering on top of it. You're not going to be sawing on top of it. So basically what I'm getting at here is that the conical tenon, even though, even though the conical tenon is at a severe angle, if you will, we're just doing this because it looks good, and we also know that basically you're not going to be standing on it, so you don't have to worry about the tolerances of the the stress that the conical tenon's going to take. I mean, I dare say if you were going to have that sort of severe angle and you were going to be getting on top of it for whatever reason on a regular basis, you probably would snap the conical tenons in time. It's just one of those things. So another thing to take into consideration, if you are kind of doing the severe rake and splays, are you putting stretchers in? This is basically going to help you out a lot if you are doing really severe rakes and splays. Obviously there is limits to this. Again, I can't give you the limits because I've never pushed the limits. But to give you a good example, if you go onto Instagram and you go into the search engine and just type in shave horses, there'll be a lot of shave horses that come up, and some of the more traditional shave horses that are hundreds of years old, you'll kind of see them in the rake and splays. It's more the splay than anything else. I always see them and I think to myself, that just doesn't look right. It's far too much of a splay. For me it is anyway. And I always think to myself, that's going to snap. Whether they do or not, I don't know. But obviously you see people using them, and I see this design, a lot. So I'm kind of leaning towards that it probably it's okay, and it does look very severe to me. Honestly, go and check it out, and as soon as you'll see a picture, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But it just looks far too severe. But going back to the stretchers, if you are worried about that, putting a stretcher in, it's going to help out massively. For whatever reason, you might have some reason where it needs to be a really wide base. I don't know the reason. It could be several. But if you're putting the stretchers in, obviously the legs can't spread, as much. Basically the legs can't come apart. I mean, by the time you've got it glued up and you've got the wedges in, I think you'd literally have to get a hammer or a clamp, a reverse clamp, and basically pry that apart. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. So that's something to take into consideration. But again, it depends what you're doing. I mean, if it's if it's a piece of furniture, it might look good, so it might be something you want in. Now, I personally think that some of these traditional chairs that you see, like the likes of Windsor chairs, Welsh stick chairs, you don't necessarily need the stretchers in, although there's no argument that they will give you a lot of strength. I'm not arguing that, but as what I'm saying is you can get away without doing them. But me personally, I don't think it looks good. I've got two chairs in my sitting room. One was my first kind of Welsh stick chair I made, and it's perfectly fine. It's got no stretchers in it, but it just doesn't look good. Then I've got my last Welsh stick chair that I made, and it's got the stretchers in it, and I just think it looks 100 times better. Although I did take a little bit more time with this. I saddled out the seat properly. I've done a lot more work to this one, but I think overall, just with the stretchers, for me, visually for me, it just sets the chair off a lot more. So, you kind of got to think of things like that. If you have got a severe, angle, a rake and a splay, will it look good if you put it in? Because you could put it in and it might not look good. You might put something in and it might be in your way, maybe in a Roman workbench, because there has been people that have asked us about putting, kind of shelving on the underside of a Roman workbench. You probably could do it. I was toying with the idea a little bit of having a go of it. but I kind of have abandoned the idea. I might still revisit it, who knows, but it just wasn't viable for me. I don't really see a reason for us doing it other than to basically show other people, which, I might do in the future. But, one of the reasons I thought not to do it is that it might get in the way. So, if that's going to get in the way, there's a possibility that stretchers would get in the way. That would be stretchers running lengthways. It kind of depends. It depends if you're putting just the centre. If you're going to put a centre stretcher in, run the length, it kind of should be okay. But as I said, there's those considerations, to take into consideration. I'm getting pretty close to my time, so I'm going to finish up on making the legs or the conical tenons, kind of along those lines, I think. So, out of all the legs I've made that's been staked furniture, personally for me, I think that the Welsh stick chair legs are probably the easiest to make with hand tools, without a lathe, etc. So for anyone that doesn't know, a typical Welsh stick leg will be narrow, not narrow, it'll be wider at the base. That's the part that'll make contact with the floor, and it kind of narrows up towards the conical tenons. I found this to be probably one of the legs that took us the least time to make, and it was probably more of the accurate, pretty much more than the rest that I've done. And one good thing about it is that by the time the last set of legs I made obviously were for the Welsh stick chair. They were hexagonal, and it tapered down. So by the time I tapered down towards one end, there wasn't a lot of work to do to create a conical tenon. I think that's what I liked about it. Obviously, one of the problems for me, because I don't have a lathe, I really should build a spring lathe. I've been lazy. I kind of did build one a while ago, but I didn't finish it off, and I think I ended up chopping it up for firewood, I think. But it was only a small little bench top thing, but I really need to get something sorted out. But one of the problems for me is that if I'm going to do something round, like a rounded leg, it can be problematic. Obviously, because I'm using a spoke shave, I'm using a draw knife, and basically sanding paper. So sometimes when I'm roughing them out, by the time I get to do the conical tenon, and then sometimes it don't meet up very well, and it's the conical tenon can end up a little bit wonky, if that makes sense. So it can be a little bit problematic. So kind of one of the ways to resolve this, it doesn't resolve it as such, but it minimises the problem, because if your conical tenon is a little bit wonky in alignment with the rest of the leg, it's a little bit difficult to explain this, but as you put it in the conical, as you put it in your drill hole that you've just used a reamer on, as you turn that leg will as you turn it, will be wonky as it goes around. This will be noticeable. So let's just say, for instance, you've got three of the legs. You've got four of the legs drilled. 4 of the holes drilled. They're all reamed. You put 3 of the legs in. The legs are perfect. The reaming's perfect. You've got that 4th leg. You put that 4th leg in, and that's like it's not it's the conical tenon's not in line correctly with the rest of the leg, and you put it in, you'll tell 100 miles away, you'll look at it and it just won't look right. So one thing you can do is actually just twist it while it's in the hole, and you can kind of get the best sort of alignment that you can get. It does actually work quite well, but obviously the leg is still bent. In essence, in conjunction with where the conical tenon is. It sounds a bit, I don't think I'm explaining this very well, but I know what I'm talking about in my own head, which really doesn't help the listener. But that can kind of be one of the problems with it. I think another one of the problems what I keep on hearing, or when I talk to people, because I do actually get people that messages from all over the world discussing Roman workbenches and whatnot, which is really cool. So really thankful for everyone that's took the time to to pop us a message. It's pretty cool speaking with people from like all over the world. Really cool. So one of the problems is that a lot of people who I've spoken to haven't got reamers, and they haven't got conical tenon cutters. For whatever reason, some people can't afford it, some people don't want to buy it. There's several reasons why. But I have had a couple of people have basically said, I really, at the moment, I just can't afford one, sort of thing, And I think that's kind of one of the problems. I mean, if you are kind of going to do stake furniture, you do need to be able to ream the hole. I think at the very least you need some sort of a reamer. I have in the past done conical tenons without a conical tenon cutter. Basically, I tend to use the Veritas. I have got a Ray Eels. If I've said that right, I can't remember what you call the guy, but I have kind of got one of his conical tenon cutters. It's quite a good one as well. It works really well, but for some reason I don't tend to go to that one for some strange reason. I don't know why, but yeah, I have like cut a conical tenon just with basically a draw knife, followed up with a spoke shave, then a card scraper, and then some sandpaper. I think Chris Schwartz kind of goes into detail a little bit about how to do it. Not so much the cutting of it, but like kind of how you can like get around it. Basically, he gets it pretty close. This is what he advises. I think somewhere along these lines, he gets it pretty close, and he just uses kind of pencil lines. The lead off a pencil, and he kind of he uses inside where you've got where you've just reamed. You basically put your pencil lines inside or the lead. Then you can put your conical tenon in, and you twist your conical tenons, and all the high spots on the conical tenons will be highlighted with the lead off the pencil, and basically you can use your draw knife or whatever, not your draw knife, your spoke shave or the card scraper to remove those high spots, and you just keep on repeating that, until you get like a good consistency of lead off the pencil all the way around the conical tenons. Don't forget as well, if you are using wedges, obviously you're going to hammer this in and you're going to put a wedge in, you're using glue, it is going to be pretty secure, but I'm pretty much at my time now, guys, so I think I'm going to call it. So a massive thank you to everyone that's just started following us, been following us for a long time. I've had a mad influx on Instagram, even just today. I don't know how many people have started following us. It's like 100 people today, absolutely crazy. So thanks very much. Thanks for all the lovely messages, the comments, giving us support and encouragement. Really appreciate it. Thanks very much, guys. And until the next time, I shall speak to you all later.